The email from Stanford University glowed on my laptop screen. The words, "Congratulations on your acceptance," barely registering as I stared at the estimated cost of attendance. $75,000 per year. The number made my stomach twist into knots. Even with my parents' promise to cover my education through the college fund they'd been building since I was born, this would be a stretch. But Stanford had been my dream school since I was 12, and after years of straight A's, volunteering, and endless extracurriculars, I'd finally made it. I called my parents immediately, my voice trembling with excitement. "Mom, Dad, I got in." Their congratulations seemed genuine but subdued. Something was off. When I mentioned the tuition costs, there was a strange silence on the other end of the line. "Honey," my mother finally said, her voice hesitant, "we need to talk to you about that when you get home." That sinking feeling in my stomach intensified. I'd never heard that tone in my mother's voice before, a mixture of guilt and resolve that made my chest tighten. I rushed home from my after-school job at the local bookstore, my mind racing with possibilities. Maybe they wanted to surprise me with something. Maybe they needed to figure out some financial details. Maybe. I found them sitting at our kitchen table, faces solemn. My father's hands were clasped in front of him, knuckles white. My mother couldn't quite meet my eyes. "Emma, sit down," my father said. I sank into the chair across from them, the excitement of my acceptance letter now completely overshadowed by dread. "We're so proud of you for getting into Stanford," my mother began. "It's an amazing achievement, and you've worked so hard." "But we've had to make some changes to our financial plans," my father interrupted, his voice firm. "Your brother Jason and Melissa have set their wedding date for June. They want to have it at Lakeside Gardens, and with everything they're planning, it's going to cost quite a bit." I nodded slowly, not yet grasping what this had to do with my college fund. "The thing is, Emma," my mother continued, reaching for my hand across the table, "we've decided to use your college fund to help pay for Jason's wedding." The words didn't make sense at first. They hung in the air between us, impossible and absurd. "My college fund," I repeated, pulling my hand back. "The money you've been saving for my education for 18 years, you're using it for Jason's wedding." My father cleared his throat. "Emma, your brother is 32. He's waited a long time to find the right person. This wedding is important to him and to the whole family. Melissa's parents are contributing, but they don't have much, and the venue alone is costing." "Dad," I cut him off, my voice barely above a whisper. "You promised me that money was for my education. I've worked so hard, applied for every scholarship I could find, maintained a 4.0 GPA. I got into Stanford." "And we're incredibly proud," my mother repeated, as if that pride could somehow replace $75,000 a year. "There are other schools," my father said, his tone suddenly practical. "State schools that are much more affordable. You can take out some loans. Most students do." "But not Jason," I said, the pieces clicking together. "Jason didn't need loans for college because you paid for it, all of it, and now you're paying for his wedding too." A flash of something, guilt, perhaps, crossed my father's face before his expression hardened. "Your brother deserves this, Emma. He and Melissa want to start their lives together with a proper wedding. And I don't deserve to start my life with the education I've worked for." My voice was rising now, tears threatening to spill. "It's not about deserving," my mother said quickly. "It's about what the family needs right now. Jason is at a stage in his life where he needs a fancy wedding more than I need an education." I stood up, my chair scraping against the floor. "Jason is an accountant. He makes 6 figures. Why can't he pay for his own wedding?" "Emma," my father's voice was sharp, "that's enough. The decision has been made. Jason deserves a beautiful wedding, and as his parents, we want to give that to him." "He deserves it more," I repeated, the words burning like acid. "That's what you're saying, isn't it?" My brother deserves my college fund more than I do. Neither of them answered, which was answer enough. I walked out of the kitchen without another word, climbed the stairs to my bedroom, and closed the door quietly behind me. Then I sat on my bed and let the tears come. That night I barely slept. My mind kept circling back to the same bitter thought. My brother Jason had always been the golden child in our family. He'd never had to fight for my parents' attention or approval. While I worked part-time jobs since I was 16 to pay for my own car insurance and clothes, Jason had received a new car for his 16th birthday. When he decided to attend an expensive private university, my parents had covered every penny. And now, at 32, when he was financially stable and established in his career, my parents were giving him my future too. The next morning, I called Stanford's financial aid office, my voice steady despite the hollow feeling in my chest. The woman on the other end was sympathetic but realistic. Even with the partial scholarship I'd been offered, even if I worked throughout college and took out the maximum in federal loans, the numbers simply didn't add up. Stanford was slipping through my fingers, and there was nothing I could do about it. When I came downstairs for breakfast, my father was reading the newspaper at the kitchen table as if nothing had changed, as if he hadn't just demolished my dreams the night before. I talked to Stanford's financial aid office, I said, pouring myself a cup of coffee. Without the college fund, I can't afford to go there. My father lowered his newspaper, just enough to look at me over the top of it. Emma, I know you're disappointed. Disappointed? I repeated, clutching my coffee mug so tightly my knuckles turned white. Dad, I'm devastated. This was my dream. He sighed, folding the newspaper and setting it aside. Sometimes in life, we have to adjust our dreams based on reality. There are plenty of good state schools where you could get an excellent education. That's not the point, I said, fighting to keep my voice even. The point is that you made a promise to me, and now you're breaking it for Jason. Again. This isn't about favoritism, Emma, my father said, though his eyes slid away from mine as he spoke. Jason and Melissa want a proper start to their marriage, and as parents, we want to support that. What about supporting me? I asked. What about giving me a proper start to my adult life? Before my father could answer, the doorbell rang. A moment later, my mother called out, Emma, Jason's here and he's brought Melissa. Perfect timing. My brother always did have a knack for showing up just when I was at my lowest. I took a deep breath, set down my coffee mug, and walked into the living room where my mother was already fawning over my future sister-in-law, admiring the sizable diamond on her left hand. Emma. Jason grinned at me, arms spread wide for a hug. At 32, my brother was tall and confident, with our father's broad shoulders and our mother's easy smile. There's my brilliant little sister. Mom just told us your big news. Stanford. That's amazing. I stiffened as he wrapped his arms around me. Did he know? Had my parents told him where the money for his extravagant wedding was coming from? Thanks, I managed, pulling away from his embrace. It's great to get in, but I might not be able to go. Turns out college is expensive. Jason's smile faltered slightly. Well, you'll figure it out. Scholarships and stuff, right? You're the smart one in the family. Emma was just telling us about Stanford's financial aid options. My father interjected smoothly. We're exploring all possibilities. My mother quickly changed the subject. Jason and Melissa have come to show us some photographs of the wedding venue. Isn't that exciting? I watched as my parents cooed over pictures of lakeside gardens, with its manicured lawns sloping down to a pristine lake, the elegant gazebo where my brother and his fiancée would exchange their vows, and the grand ballroom where 200 guests would dine and dance the night away. Each new image felt like a personal affront. This flower arrangement, that gourmet menu, the designer dress, all paid for with my future. We've booked the top package, Melissa was saying, her perfectly manicured finger pointing to a glossy brochure. It includes the ceremony, the reception, a 5-course dinner, premium open bar, and a honeymoon suite. "It's the beginning of your lives together," my mother said, beaming. "It should be perfect." "And we are so grateful for your help," Melissa added, reaching over to squeeze my mother's hand. "My parents are contributing what they can, but they could never afford something like this on their own." I couldn't take it anymore. "Excuse me," I murmured, standing up. "I have to get to work." "But you don't start until noon on Saturdays," my mother protested. "I picked up an extra shift," I lied. "Trying to save up, for college." I didn't miss the look that passed between my parents, a mixture of guilt and irritation. I was making them uncomfortable, and that wasn't allowed in our family. Negative feelings were meant to be suppressed, especially when they interfered with Jason's happiness. As I grabbed my purse and keys, Jason called after me, "Hey, Em, we'll need to talk about your bridesmaid dress soon." Melissa's thinking dusty rose for the color scheme. I turned back, forcing a smile that felt like it might crack my face. "Sure, whatever you need, Jason." The door closed behind me with a satisfying thud, and I leaned against it for a moment, breathing in the cool spring air. A bridesmaid dress that would likely cost hundreds of dollars that I would have to pay for myself, for a wedding that was stealing my education. The irony was almost too much to bear. I drove to the small park near our house and sat on a bench overlooking the duck pond. The day was beautiful, sunshine sparkling on the water, daffodils nodding in the gentle breeze. But I couldn't appreciate any of it. All I could think about was Stanford slipping away, and with it, all my carefully laid plans. My phone buzzed with a text from my best friend, Lena. "Hey, how did your parents take the Stanford news? Celebration dinner tonight." I stared at her message, tears welling up again. How could I even begin to explain this situation? It sounded absurd, like something out of a bad movie. Parents sacrifice daughter's college fund for son's lavish wedding. Who does that? My parents, apparently. I started typing a reply to Lena, then deleted it. Started again, deleted again. Finally, I simply wrote, "Rain check on dinner. Family stuff going on. Tell you later." Over the next few weeks, I threw myself into my work at the bookstore, picking up as many extra shifts as I could. I applied for every scholarship I could find, no matter how small or how remote my chances. I researched state schools with good programs in my field, but each alternative felt like settling, like giving up on the future I had worked so hard to create. At home, the atmosphere was tense. My parents acted as if everything was normal, as if they hadn't completely upended my life. They continued to gush about Jason's wedding plans, seemingly oblivious to how each enthusiastic mention of the expensive venue or the gourmet catering stabbed me like a knife. Jason and Melissa were constant visitors, bringing over sample invitations, flower arrangements, and cake flavors for my parents' approval. I made myself scarce during these visits, volunteering for extra shifts at work or studying at the library. The few times I couldn't avoid them, I plastered on a smile and played my part, the supportive sister, the enthusiastic bridesmaid, while bitterness festered inside me. One evening, as I sat at my desk calculating tuition costs for various state universities, there was a soft knock at my bedroom door. "Come in," I called, quickly wiping away the tears that had been silently sliding down my cheeks. To my surprise, it was Jason who entered, looking uncharacteristically hesitant. "Hey, Em," he said, hovering awkwardly in the doorway. "Got a minute?" I nodded, turning my chair to face him. He sat on the edge of my bed, running a hand through his hair, a nervous gesture I recognized from our childhood. I wanted to talk to you about Stanford." My heart thumped painfully in my chest. So he did know. "Mom and Dad told me yesterday," he continued, not quite meeting my eyes, "about using your college fund for the wedding." I waited, saying nothing, watching him squirm. "I had no idea, Emma. I swear. I thought they were just being generous because they always have been with me." He let out a hollow laugh. "I never questioned where the money was coming from." "And now that you know?" I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. Jason sighed, finally looking directly at me. I told them it wasn't right, that they should use the money for what it was intended for. Your education. A tiny spark of hope flared in my chest. And Jason hesitated. Dad said the deposits have already been made. Non-refundable. He said it's too late to change course now, that we'd lose thousands. The spark extinguished as quickly as it had ignited. Of course, I said flatly. Heaven forbid you lose your perfect wedding venue. That's not fair, Emma. Jason's face flushed. I didn't know. And now that I do, Melissa and I have been talking about scaling back some things. Maybe finding a cheaper venue. Forget it, I cut him off. You said it yourself. The deposits are non-refundable. You might as well have your dream wedding since my dream education is already off the table. Jason looked genuinely distressed. There has to be something we can do. Maybe I could help with some of your tuition. Not all of it. Obviously, Melissa and I have a mortgage, and we're planning to start a family soon, but something. I laughed bitterly. Don't strain yourself, Jason. I'll figure it out on my own. I always do. What's that supposed to mean? It means that I've been working since I was 16 to pay for my own clothes, my own car insurance, my own phone bill, while you've had everything handed to you on a silver platter. It means that I've spent my entire life watching our parents bend over backwards to give you everything you want, while I've had to fight for every scrap of attention or support. It means that none of this, you suddenly discovering your conscience, changes the fact that our parents think you deserve my future more than I do. Jason stared at me, shocked. Emma, I had no idea you felt this way. Of course you didn't, I replied wearily. You've never had to. He stood up, his expression a mixture of guilt and defensiveness. Look, I'm sorry about Stanford. Really, I am. But it's not my fault that Mom and Dad made this decision. Did you refuse the money when they offered it? I asked quietly. His silence was answer enough. That's what I thought, I said, turning back to my computer. Close the door on your way out, please. After Jason left, I sat staring at my computer screen, the numbers blurring through my tears. The unfairness of it all threatened to overwhelm me. But beneath the hurt and betrayal, something else was beginning to take shape. A steely determination. If my parents and Jason thought I would simply accept this situation, they were wrong. I might not be able to change their decision, but I wasn't going to pretend it was okay, and I certainly wasn't going to let them off the hook for what they'd done. The next day, I called Stanford again and explained my situation to a different financial aid counselor. This one listened sympathetically, then suggested I set up an appointment with the Dean of Admissions to discuss special circumstances. It was a long shot, but it was something, a tiny glimmer of hope in what had felt like absolute darkness. That evening, when I came home from work, I found my parents sitting in the living room with a stack of wedding invitation samples spread out on the coffee table. Emma, my mother called as I tried to slip past to the stairs. Come look at these invitations. Jason and Melissa have narrowed it down to 3 choices, and they want our opinion. I paused in the doorway, looking at my parents' expectant faces at the expensive invitations with their gold embossing and heavy cardstock, and something inside me snapped. No, I said simply. My mother's smile faltered. What do you mean, no? I mean, no. I don't want to look at wedding invitations. I don't want to talk about flower arrangements or bridesmaid dresses or any of it. I don't want to pretend that everything is fine when it's not. My father set down the invitation he'd been examining. Emma, I know you're still upset about the college fund, but this attitude isn't helping anyone. And pretending to be happy about a wedding that's costing me my future is helping who, exactly? I countered. You? Jason? Making you all feel better about what you've done. We've already discussed this, my father said, his voice taking on that dismissive tone he used whenever he considered a matter settled. The decision has been made. Continuing to dwell on it is pointless. Funny how easy it is for you to move on from destroying my dreams, I said, my voice shaking with emotion. But I'm not going to just get over it, Dad. I'm not going to pretend that what you're doing is okay. Emma, my mother said, her voice pleading, we're still your parents. We still love you and want what's best for you. What's best for me? I laughed incredulously. If you wanted what was best for me, you wouldn't be spending my college fund on Jason's wedding. He's 32 years old, Mom. He makes more money than you and Dad combined. Why can't he pay for his own wedding? Your brother works hard for his money, my father said defensively. He deserves to start his marriage without financial strain. And I don't deserve to start my adult life without the crushing burden of student loans. I shot back. I've worked hard too, Dad. Straight A's since freshman year. Part-time jobs. Volunteering. Everything you told me I needed to do to get into a good college. I held up my end of the bargain. You're the ones who broke your promise. My father stood up, his face flushed with anger. That's enough, Emma. I won't be spoken to this way in my own home. Your home, I repeated softly. That says it all, doesn't it? This is your home, your money, your decision. Never mind that it's my life you're playing with. Before either of them could respond, the doorbell rang. Perfect timing, as always, Jason and Melissa arriving for yet another wedding planning session. I turned away as my mother hurried to answer the door, her face a mask of forced cheerfulness. Jason! Melissa! Come in, come in. We were just looking at the invitation samples. They're all so beautiful. I started up the stairs, determined to escape to my room before I was drawn into the charade of happy family planning a joyous occasion. Emma, Jason called after me. Don't you want to see the final invitation choices? I paused on the stairs, not turning around. No, Jason, I don't. In fact, I think I'm going to have to decline being a bridesmaid in your wedding. I'm not sure I can afford a dress, what with having to figure out how to pay for college on my own now. The silence that followed was deafening. I continued up the stairs without looking back, closing my bedroom door firmly behind me. Minutes later, there was a soft knock. I ignored it, but the door opened anyway, revealing Melissa standing awkwardly in the hallway. Emma, she said hesitantly, can we talk? I sat up on my bed, crossing my arms. About what? Melissa stepped inside, closing the door behind her. Unlike Jason, who had grown up with every advantage, Melissa came from a working-class family. She'd worked her way through community college, then transferred to a state university where she'd met my brother in a business class. I'd always respected her determination and work ethic, which made her complicity in this situation all the more disappointing. Jason told me about your college fund, she said, sitting gingerly on the edge of my desk chair. I had no idea, Emma. We thought your parents were just being generous because they were excited about the wedding. And now that you know? I asked, echoing the question I'd asked Jason. Melissa twisted her engagement ring nervously. I feel terrible. Jason and I have been talking, and we can't accept this money knowing where it's coming from. My heart skipped a beat. You're going to tell my parents to use the money for my education instead? Well, Melissa hesitated. It's complicated. Like Jason probably told you, your parents have already made non-refundable deposits. The venue, the caterer, the photographer, they all required significant deposits to hold the date. So you're still going ahead with everything, I said flatly. We're scaling back where we can, Melissa insisted. We've canceled the ice sculpture, and we're looking at less expensive options for the flowers. We thought maybe we could contribute some of what we saved to your college fund. I stared at her incredulously. Let me get this straight. You're keeping the venue, the catering, the photographer, all the big-ticket items, but you're willing to sacrifice the ice sculpture that no one cares about anyway. Melissa flushed. We're trying to find a compromise, Emma. We can't just cancel everything at this point. Why not? I challenged. If you're really sorry, if you really think what my parents are doing is wrong, why not postpone the wedding? Save up your own money for the wedding you want instead of taking my future. Postpone the wedding. Melissa looked genuinely shocked by the suggestion. Emma, we've been planning this for months. Everyone has already made arrangements, booked flights, taken time off work. And I've been planning for Stanford for years, I cut in. But I guess that doesn't matter as much as inconveniencing your wedding guests. Melissa stood up, her expression hardening. I came here to try to make peace, Emma. I thought you'd appreciate that Jason and I are trying to find a solution. A solution that still gives you everything you want and leaves me with nothing, I pointed out. How generous. You know what? Jason was right. You are being childish about this, Melissa said, moving toward the door. Life doesn't always give you exactly what you want, Emma. Sometimes you have to compromise. Funny how I'm the only one who's expected to compromise here, I called after her as she left, slamming the door behind her. I fell back on my bed, staring up at the ceiling. Childish. That's how they saw me, as a child having a tantrum because I couldn't have what I wanted. Not as a young adult whose future was being sacrificed for an extravagant party. Not as a daughter whose parents had broken a fundamental promise. The realization crystallized something inside me. I had been playing by their rules, trying to reason with them, appeal to their sense of fairness and decency. But it wasn't working. It was time to try a different approach. The next day, I requested a meeting with my parents. I sat them down at the kitchen table, where they had delivered the devastating news about my college fund just weeks before. I've been thinking about the situation with Stanford and Jason's wedding. I began, my voice calm and measured. And I've come to a decision. My parents exchanged wary glances. I've decided to accept that you're not going to change your minds about using my college fund for Jason's wedding, I continued. That's your right as the ones controlling the money. My father nodded cautiously, clearly surprised by my apparent surrender. I'm glad you're seeing things more reasonably now, Emma. But, I said, holding up a hand, I want you to understand the consequences of your decision. Consequences, my mother repeated, frowning. Yes, I said firmly. You've chosen to prioritize Jason's wedding over my education. That's a clear message about where I stand in this family, and I'm going to remember it. I'll find my own way to pay for college, even if it's not Stanford. I'll work multiple jobs if I have to. I'll take out loans. I'll apply for every scholarship that exists. And when I graduate and build my career, I'll remember who supported me and who didn't. My mother's eyes filled with tears. Emma, that sounds like a threat. It's not a threat, Mom. It's a promise. And a warning. I stood up, feeling strangely calm. You're teaching me an important lesson about family right now. I'm learning that, in our family, Jason's wants will always come before my needs. I'm learning that promises can be broken when something more exciting comes along. I'm learning that I can only count on myself. These are valuable lessons, and I won't forget them. My father's face had gone pale. Emma, you're blowing this out of proportion. We're not abandoning you. We still love you and want to support you. Just not financially, I finished for him. Not when it conflicts with giving Jason what he wants. I understand that now, and I accept it. But you need to accept that this decision will permanently change our relationship. I walked out of the kitchen before they could respond, feeling a strange mix of sadness and liberation. I had said my piece. I had let them know exactly where I stood. The ball was in their court now. What I didn't expect was for my words to have such an immediate impact. That evening, I overheard my parents arguing in their bedroom, their voices carrying through the thin walls of our house. She means it, Robert, my mother was saying, her voice thick with tears. Did you see her face? This isn't just teenage drama. We're going to lose her. What do you suggest we do? My father shot back. We've already paid thousands in deposits. The wedding is less than 2 months away. We can't just pull the rug out from under Jason and Melissa now. And we can pull the rug out from under Emma, my mother challenged. She's worked so hard for Stanford. It's been her dream for years. Jason has dreams too, my father insisted. He wants a beautiful wedding to start his marriage. Jason is 32 years old with a successful career, my mother replied, her voice stronger now. Emma is 18 and just starting out. If we have to choose— We've already chosen, my father interrupted. The deposits have been made. It's done. There was a long silence, then my mother's voice, quiet but clear. Maybe it doesn't have to be one or the other, Robert. Maybe there's another way. I pressed my ear against the wall, straining to hear more, but they lowered their voices after that. Still, my heart was racing. Had I actually gotten through to them? Was there a chance they might reconsider? The next morning, my mother caught me before I left for school. "Emma," she said, her eyes red-rimmed from what looked like a sleepless night. "Your father and I have been talking. We're going to find a way to help you with Stanford." I stared at her, hardly daring to hope. "How?" "We're not sure yet," she admitted, "but we're going to figure it out. You deserve your education, and we shouldn't have put Jason's wedding ahead of that. I'm so sorry we hurt you." I stood frozen, unable to process this sudden reversal. After weeks of defending their decision, of insisting that Jason deserved my college fund more than I did, they were actually apologizing? What changed your minds? I asked cautiously. My mother sighed. "What you said yesterday about how this would permanently change our relationship. It made me realize what we were really doing, not just taking away your college fund, but taking away your trust in us." I couldn't bear that thought. Relief and gratitude washed over me, but they were tempered by wariness. What about the non-refundable deposits? The venue and everything? "We'll figure something out," my mother repeated. "Maybe we can take out a home equity loan. Or Jason and Melissa might need to scale back their plans a bit. The important thing is that we find a solution that doesn't sacrifice your future." I hesitated, then stepped forward and hugged her. "Thank you, Mom." She held me tightly, her voice muffled against my hair. "I'm so sorry, Emma. We should never have put you in this position." That night, my parents called a family meeting. Jason and Melissa were there, both looking uncomfortable as my father explained the situation. "We made a mistake," he said, the admission clearly difficult for him. "We shouldn't have offered to use Emma's college fund for the wedding without discussing it with her first. It was her future we were deciding, and she deserved a voice in that decision." Jason nodded, looking genuinely contrite. "I agree. And Melissa and I have been talking. We don't want Emma to have to give up Stanford for our wedding." Melissa chimed in. "We've come up with some ideas for how to cut costs without compromising too much on the wedding we've planned." My father held up a hand. "That's good to hear, but your mother and I have made a decision. We're going to take out a home equity loan to cover the wedding expenses we've already committed to. Emma's college fund will remain intact for its intended purpose, her education." I stared at my father in disbelief. After weeks of insisting that Jason deserved my college fund more than I did, he was now willing to put his own financial future on the line to make things right? It seemed too good to be true. "Are you sure about this, Dad?" I asked cautiously. "A home equity loan is a big deal." "I'm sure," he said firmly. "It's the right thing to do. We made a promise to you, and we shouldn't have broken it." Jason leaned forward, his expression serious. "Dad, you don't have to do this alone. Melissa and I can contribute more to the wedding costs. We've been saving for a down payment on a bigger house, but that can wait. This is more important." My father looked at Jason with surprise and what might have been pride. "Thank you, son. That would help a lot." I glanced between my brother and my father, feeling a strange mix of emotions. Relief that my Stanford dream wasn't dead after all. Gratitude that my family had finally heard me, but also lingering hurt and caution Could I really trust that they wouldn't change their minds again? As if reading my thoughts, my mother reached across the table and took my hand. Emma, we know it will take time to rebuild your trust in us, but we're going to do whatever it takes. Your education is just as important as Jason's wedding. More important, really, because it's your future. We should never have forgotten that. Thank you, I said simply, squeezing her hand. It wasn't a complete resolution. There was still hurt to heal, trust to rebuild, but it was a start. A recognition of the wrong that had been done and a genuine attempt to make it right. In that moment, sitting around our kitchen table with my imperfect but trying family, I allowed myself to believe that maybe, just maybe, everything would work out after all. 3 weeks passed, and things seemed to be improving. My parents consulted with their bank about the home equity loan. Jason and Melissa scaled back some of their wedding plans, opting for a less expensive photographer and simpler floral arrangements. The ice sculpture naturally remained canceled. I sent my deposit to Stanford, securing my place in the fall freshman class. But a nagging worry persisted in the back of my mind. My parents' sudden reversal felt too good to be true. Would they really follow through? Or would they change their minds again once the initial shock of my confrontation wore off? My concerns weren't entirely unfounded. I noticed my father growing increasingly quiet whenever the subject of the home equity loan came up. The paperwork seemed to be taking longer than expected. There were mysterious phone calls with the bank that ended abruptly when I entered the room. Then came the morning I found my mother at the kitchen table, surrounded by papers, her face drawn with worry. "Mom," I asked, pouring myself a cup of coffee. "Everything okay?" She looked up, startled, then forced a smile. "Just some wedding details, sweetheart. Nothing to worry about." But I glimpsed the bank letterhead before she gathered the papers into a folder. "Is there a problem with the loan?" My mother hesitated, then sighed. "We were hoping to shield you from this, but yes, the bank denied our application. Your father's business hasn't been doing as well as he let on, and our credit isn't as strong as we thought." My stomach dropped. "So what does that mean for Stanford?" "We're exploring other options," she assured me quickly. "Your father is talking to his brother about a personal loan, and I'm looking into taking on extra shifts at the hospital." I nodded, trying to believe her, but doubt gnawed at me. If my parents' financial situation was worse than they'd admitted, how realistic was it for them to fund both Jason's wedding and my education? That evening, I overheard another argument between my parents, this one more heated than before. "We promised her, Robert," my mother was saying. "We can't go back on our word again." "I know that," my father snapped, "but we're running out of options. The bank won't budge on the loan. Ted can only lend us a fraction of what we need, and the wedding is in 6 weeks. What would you have me do?" "Tell Jason the truth," my mother replied. "Tell him we can't afford to pay for the wedding we promised. He's an adult. He'll understand. After he's already sent invitations? After Melissa's already bought her dress? How can I do that to my son?" "How can you break another promise to your daughter?" my mother countered. There was a long silence, then my father's voice, defeated and quiet. "Maybe we won't have to choose. Maybe there's still a way to do both." But I could hear the doubt in his voice. The next day I made a decision. I couldn't live with this uncertainty, this constant fear that my future was hanging by a thread. I needed to take matters into my own hands. I contacted Stanford's financial aid office again and scheduled an emergency meeting with the dean of admissions. I explained my situation in excruciating detail, not just the fact that my parents had initially diverted my college fund to my brother's wedding, but also their current financial struggles and the precariousness of their promise to fund my education. The financial aid officer was sympathetic but realistic. "Even if we could offer you additional aid, Emma, it wouldn't come close to covering the full cost of attendance. And if your parents' financial situation is unstable, that puts you in an even more vulnerable position." I nodded, fighting back tears. "So what are my options?" You could defer your admission for a year while you work and save money, she suggested. Or consider attending a less expensive school for your first 2 years, then transferring to Stanford. Neither option appealed to me. Deferring meant delaying my dreams for a full year with no guarantee that my financial situation would improve. Transferring meant giving up the full Stanford experience I'd worked so hard for. As I left the financial aid office, my phone rang. It was Jason. Emma, can we meet for coffee? There's something I need to talk to you about. An hour later, I sat across from my brother at a small cafe near campus, warming my hands around a mug of hot chocolate as he stirred his coffee nervously. I overheard Mom and Dad arguing last night. He began without preamble, about the wedding and your college fund. I nodded, unsurprised. The walls in our house were thin, and the arguments had been getting louder. I had no idea things were so bad, Jason continued. Dad's business, the loan application being denied. Why didn't they tell me? For the same reason they didn't tell me when they decided to use my college fund for your wedding, I replied, unable to keep the bitterness from my voice. This family has a communication problem. Jason winced. Fair enough. But Emma, I want you to know that Melissa and I have been talking. We've decided to cancel the wedding venue. My heart skipped a beat. What? We're canceling the venue, the catering, all the big expenses, Jason repeated. We're going to have a small ceremony in Melissa's parents' backyard instead. It's not what we planned, but it's the right thing to do. Your education is more important than our party. I stared at him, stunned. But the non-refundable deposits, the invitations you've already sent, won't you lose thousands of dollars? Jason shrugged, though I could see the tension in his shoulders. We'll lose the deposits, yes, but we're okay with that. It's our choice, our sacrifice to make, not yours. Does Melissa really agree to this? I asked skeptically, remembering how resistant she'd been to the idea of postponing the wedding. It was her idea, Jason said, a soft smile spreading across his face. She said she'd rather get married in a potato sack in the rain than start our marriage knowing we'd sacrificed your future for a fancy party. For the first time in weeks, I felt a weight lifting from my shoulders. I don't know what to say, Jason. Thank you. Don't thank me, he replied, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. I should have done this weeks ago, the moment I found out where the money was coming from. I'm sorry it took me so long to do the right thing. Better late than never, I offered, squeezing his hand in return. That evening, Jason and Melissa came over to tell my parents about their decision. I expected relief, gratitude, perhaps even a bit of resistance from my father. What I didn't expect was my father's reaction. Absolutely not, he said firmly, shaking his head. You are not canceling your wedding venue. Jason blinked in surprise. Dad, it's our decision. We want to do this for Emma. I'm sorry, I interjected. But don't we want to solve this problem? Jason and Melissa are offering a solution. My father ran a hand through his thinning hair, a gesture I recognized from childhood as a sign of deep stress. You don't understand. It's not that simple. What don't we understand? Jason pressed. If we cancel the venue, you can use that money for Emma's education instead. Problem solved. My father exchanged a look with my mother, who nodded slightly. He sighed heavily. The truth is, we've already spent most of Emma's college fund on wedding deposits. And when the bank denied our loan application, we put the remaining expenses on credit cards. The room fell silent as the implications of his words sank in. So even if we cancel the venue now, Jason said slowly, the deposits are gone. That money can't be recovered for Emma's education. My father nodded miserably. I'm so sorry. We were desperate and not thinking clearly. We convinced ourselves we'd find a way to make it work, that something would come through. But now we're facing the consequences of our poor decisions. I felt as if the floor had dropped out from under me. So what happens to Stanford? We'll still find a way, my mother said quickly. Your father and I are prepared to do whatever it takes. With what money? I interrupted, my voice sharper than intended. You've spent my college fund, you can't get a loan, and now you're in credit card debt. What magic solution are you expecting to materialize in the next 3 months before tuition is due? No one had an answer. I think, Melissa said quietly, breaking the tense silence, that we should still cancel the venue and other expenses. We won't get the deposits back, but we can stop the financial bleeding. A backyard wedding will be just as meaningful, and it's the right thing to do regardless. Agreed, Jason nodded. And I want to take this a step further. I've been looking at my finances, and I think I can contribute $15,000 toward Emma's first year at Stanford. I stared at my brother, overwhelmed by his unexpected generosity. That won't cover everything, I said, doing the mental math. Not even close. It's a start, Jason insisted, and maybe with some additional scholarships, student loans, and a part-time job. And we'll contribute whatever we can, my mother added. Now that we won't be paying for the full wedding, we can put that money toward your education instead. My father nodded, looking both ashamed and determined. I've also been considering selling my boat. It's not worth a fortune, but it could add another $12,000 or so. I looked around at my family, feeling a complex mixture of emotions. Anger at the reckless decisions that had put us in this position, appreciation for their belated efforts to make things right, fear that it still wouldn't be enough. I've already talked to Stanford's financial aid office, I said. Even with all of this, I'd still need to take out significant loans. We're talking about $75,000 per year for 4 years. Maybe we should consider Plan B, my mother suggested gently. The state university offered you a full scholarship. It's a good school, Emma. I nodded, throat tight. She was right. The state university was a good school. It just wasn't Stanford. I need some time to think, I said, standing up. This is a lot to process. That night, I couldn't sleep. I tossed and turned, weighing my options, calculating numbers, trying to envision my future down different paths. By morning, I had made my decision. At breakfast, I found my parents and told them, I'm going to attend state university. My mother's face fell. Oh, Emma, are you sure? We can still try to find a way to make Stanford work. I'm sure, I said, feeling strangely calm. It's the practical choice. I can graduate debt-free with the scholarship they've offered. And it's a good school with a strong program in my field. But Stanford has been your dream for so long, my father said, guilt etched across his face. Dreams change, I replied, and sometimes they have to be delayed, not abandoned. Maybe I'll go to Stanford for graduate school. But right now, this is the smart decision. My parents exchanged a look I couldn't quite interpret. Relief, perhaps, mixed with lingering guilt. We're so sorry, Emma, my mother said, reaching for my hand. We failed you. Yes, you did, I agreed, not unkindly. You broke a promise to me that you shouldn't have broken. But I'm making this decision for myself now, not because you forced me into it. That's an important difference. Later that day, I called Jason to tell him my decision. You don't need to contribute that $15,000, I assured him. State you gave me a full ride. I'll be fine. Are you sure? He asked. Melissa and I want to help. We feel terrible about our role in all this. I'm sure, I said firmly. Keep the money. Start your marriage without that financial burden. Just promise me you'll have a beautiful, meaningful wedding, even if it's not at the fancy lake resort. We will, Jason promised. And Emma, I'm really proud of you. You're handling this with more maturity than any of us. His words touched me more than I expected. Throughout this ordeal, all I had wanted was for my family to recognize my worth, to see me as more than just the little sister, the afterthought whose dreams could be sacrificed for Jason's wants. And now, ironically, in giving up Stanford, I had finally earned their respect. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of activity. Jason and Melissa threw themselves into planning their new, simplified wedding. My parents, freed from the financial pressure of the extravagant venue, seemed relieved if still remorseful. I finalized my enrollment at State University, secured campus housing, and began preparing for my freshman year. Then, 3 days before Jason and Melissa's backyard wedding, my father called a family meeting. "I've received some unexpected news," he began, looking more animated than I'd seen him in months. "An old business associate of mine heard about our situation and has offered me a partnership in his consulting firm. It's a substantial opportunity, more money than I've been making, plus benefits and profit sharing." "That's wonderful, Robert," my mother exclaimed. "When would you start?" "Immediately," my father replied. "In fact, I've already accepted the position. And there's more." He turned to me, his expression solemn but hopeful. "Emma, I know you've made your decision about State University, and we respect that. But I want you to know that with this new position, your mother and I should be able to help you with Stanford after all. Not the full amount, but enough that with Jason's contribution and reasonable loans, it could be feasible." I sat back, stunned. After all the emotional turmoil, after finally accepting my altered path, was Stanford back on the table? I don't know what to say. I stammered. "I've already accepted State's scholarship. I've got a roommate assigned and everything." "You don't have to decide right now," my mother said quickly. "Just know that the option is there if you want it." "Think about it, Em," Jason added. "If you really want Stanford, you should go for it. Don't give up your dream because of our mistakes." I promised to consider it, though my mind was spinning. That night, I made pro and con lists, researched both universities for the 100th time, and tried to imagine my life down each path. By morning, I had my answer. On the day of Jason and Melissa's wedding, the sun shone brightly on Melissa's parents' modest backyard. Strings of white lights and paper lanterns hung from the trees. Folding chairs wrapped in simple ribbon lined a makeshift aisle. A flower-covered arch stood at the end of the lawn, framing the spot where my brother would marry the woman he loved. It wasn't the grand lakeside venue with its manicured gardens and elegant ballroom. There was no gourmet 5-course meal, no premium open bar. The guest list had been cut in half. But as I helped Melissa with her veil in her childhood bedroom, I could see that none of that mattered to her. "You look beautiful," I told her, adjusting the simple circlet of flowers in her hair. "Thank you," she smiled, squeezing my hand. "Not just for the compliment, but for everything, Emma. For understanding. For forgiving us." "I'm still working on the forgiveness part," I admitted. "But I'm getting there." Melissa's expression turned serious. "Have you decided?" "About Stanford." I nodded. "I have. I'm going to State. My decision." "Are you sure?" "Your father's new job is great for him and for our family," I finished. "But my reasons for choosing State go beyond finances now. It's a good school. I won a merit scholarship based on my own achievements. And I can graduate debt-free, which will give me more freedom to pursue whatever comes next." I paused, then added, "including Stanford for graduate school, if that's still what I want." Melissa studied my face. "You're really okay with this, aren't you?" "I am," I said, realizing as I spoke that it was true. This whole situation taught me something important. Dreams matter, but so does adaptability. So does making smart choices for the long term. I'm choosing a path that feels right for me now, not just clinging to a plan I made when I was 12. "That's incredibly mature," Melissa said. "More mature than the rest of us have been, honestly." I smiled. "Well, one of us has to be." The wedding was beautiful in its simplicity. As Jason recited his vows under the flower arch, his voice catching with emotion, I found myself thinking about the true cost of things. Not the price tag, but the value. What was worth sacrificing for? What wasn't? My parents had made a terrible mistake. Several of them, in fact. They had broken their promise to me, prioritized Jason's wants over my needs, then tried to fix things through financial decisions that only dug them deeper into trouble. But in the aftermath of those mistakes, something unexpected had emerged. A new family dynamic, a recognition of my worth and autonomy, a commitment from all of us to communicate better, to be honest about both our resources and our priorities. At the small reception that followed, Jason clinked his glass for a toast. "I want to thank everyone for being here today," he began, especially given the last-minute change of plans. "Melissa and I originally thought we needed a grand venue and all the trimmings to start our marriage right. But through some family circumstances," here he glanced at me with an apologetic smile, "we've been reminded of what really matters. Not the fancy venue or the expensive dinner, but the people we love and the values we choose to live by." He raised his glass higher. "So here's to starting our marriage in a way that reflects our true values. Here's to my brilliant little sister Emma, who's taught us all something important about grace under pressure. And here's to family, imperfect, frustrating, but ultimately worth fighting for." I raised my glass along with everyone else, unexpected tears pricking my eyes. As I looked around at the simple backyard transformed by love and effort, at my brother and his bride radiant with happiness, at my parents watching me with a mixture of regret and pride, I realized something. I might not be headed to Stanford in the fall. My path had veered from the one I'd mapped out so carefully, but I had gained something valuable from this painful experience, a clearer sense of my own strength, my own worth, and the kind of person I wanted to be. Not someone who clung bitterly to broken promises, but someone who could acknowledge hurt, stand up for herself, and then move forward with wisdom and dignity. The reception continued into the evening, fairy lights twinkling as dusk fell. I danced with my father, his hand trembling slightly in mine. "Are you really okay with your decision, Emma?" he asked quietly. "Because if Stanford is still what you want, we'll make it happen. Somehow." I looked up at him, seeing the genuine remorse in his eyes, the desperate desire to make amends. "I'm really okay, Dad. This was my choice made for my reasons. That matters more than which university I attend." He nodded, blinking back tears. "When did you get so wise?" "Recently," I replied with a small smile. "Through necessity." Later, as I helped clear away some of the dishes, my mother found me in the kitchen. "I've been thinking about what you said," she began, loading plates into the dishwasher, "about how this family has a communication problem. You're right, and I want you to know that your father and I are committed to doing better." "That's good to hear," I said, handing her another stack of plates. "As part of that," she continued, "we've set up a separate savings account. A small percentage of your father's new salary will go into it each month, earmarked for your graduate school fund. We can't replace what we took from your college fund, but we can start building toward your future again." I was touched by the gesture, imperfect as it was. "Thank you, Mom. That means a lot." She hesitated, then said, "There's something else I need to tell you. Something I should have said weeks ago. I'm proud of you, Emma. Not just for your achievements, though those are impressive, but for who you are, for your strength and your integrity. I hope you know that." I did know it now, though I hadn't always been sure. "I love you, Mom, even when I'm angry with you." "And I love you," she replied, pulling me into a hug. "Always, no matter what." The next morning, as Jason and Melissa left for their modest honeymoon, a weekend at a nearby bed and breakfast rather than the 2-week Caribbean cruise they'd originally planned, Jason pulled me aside. "I have something for you," he said, pressing an envelope into my hand. "Don't open it until Melissa and I are gone, okay?" I nodded, puzzled, and watched as they drove away, tin cans rattling behind their car. "Just married," written on the back window. When I opened the envelope, I found a check for $15,000 and a note in Jason's handwriting. "Emma, I know you've decided on state, and I respect your decision. This money is still yours. Use it for study abroad, a semester in DC, grad school applications, or just keep it for after college when you're starting out on your own. Consider it a small repayment for all I've taken from you over the years without realizing it. I love you and I'm so sorry. Jason. I stared at the check, tears blurring my vision. It wasn't about the money, not really. It was about recognition, acknowledgement, a concrete symbol that my dreams and future mattered to my family as much as Jason's did. 3 months later, I moved into my dorm room at State University. My roommate turned out to be smart and funny, the campus more beautiful than I'd remembered, the professors in my department nationally recognized in their fields. I threw myself into my classes, joined the newspaper, made new friends, and gradually Stanford faded from being a painful loss to simply a different path I might have taken. During Parents' Weekend in October, my mother and father visited, proudly wearing State University sweatshirts and taking dozens of photos. As we walked across the leaf-strewn campus, my father said, "You know, Emma, I think you made the right choice. This place suits you." "I think so too," I replied, realizing with some surprise that I meant it. Sometimes the detour becomes the destination. My father nodded thoughtfully. "I've been thinking a lot about what happened with the college fund, about why your mother and I made the decisions we did. And I prompted when he fell silent. "And I realized something uncomfortable," he admitted. "For years, I've measured success by external things, the house, the boat, the ability to give my children what they wanted. When Jason asked for help with his wedding, saying no would have meant admitting I couldn't provide everything for my family. My pride wouldn't let me do that. Even if it meant breaking your promise to me," I observed, not accusingly but matter-of-factly. "Even then," he acknowledged, "I told myself it was because Jason deserved it, but the truth is it was about my ego, my need to be the provider, the successful father. I'm ashamed of that now." "I appreciate your honesty," I said, tucking my arm through his as we walked. "And for what it's worth, I think the true measure of a father isn't giving your children everything they want. It's teaching them what matters, even if the lesson comes the hard way." My father squeezed my arm, his eyes suspiciously bright. "When did you get so smart?" I smiled up at him. "I had good teachers. Eventually." That evening, as my parents prepared to drive home, my mother handed me an envelope. "The first deposit into your graduate school fund," she explained. "It's not much yet, but it's a start." I accepted the envelope, recognizing it for what it was. Not just money, but a renewed commitment, a tangible symbol of my place in our family's priorities. "Thank you," I said simply. "No," my mother replied, hugging me tightly. "Thank you, Emma, for teaching us what really matters." As their car disappeared down the tree-lined drive, I stood on the steps of my dormitory, the envelope in my hand, the future stretching before me. Different than I'd planned, but full of possibility nonetheless. I thought about the painful lesson my family had learned, about broken promises and second chances, about the true cost of the choices we make. The $75,000 bill that had seemed so devastating months ago had ultimately delivered something more valuable than a brand-name education. It had forced a reckoning in my family, exposed the cracks in our foundation, and created space for something healthier to grow. It had taught us all that while money matters, integrity matters more. That promises kept are the true currency of family bonds. That sometimes the most expensive lessons are the ones most worth learning. I turned and walked back into my dorm, ready to continue writing my own story, not the one I'd originally planned, but perhaps a better one. A story of resilience, of forgiveness, of finding my own path. A story that was just beginning.